As of now, it is absolutely criminal that no AMC has come up with an aggressive hybrid index fund. So there are indices which has got 65% equity and 35% of bonds, like the CRISIL aggressive index, hybrid index. Right. You can have an index fund that tracks that. We don't have that. All the aggressive hybrid funds today are all actively managed. And there's a lot of money in there because the AMCs sell them as the way I said, diversification, blah, blah, kind of stuff. And I think they don't want to that AUM to go to the index. That is my feeling. I have
passively managed side.
Yeah, I don't see any. It's a no-brainer. If I had a AMC license today, that will be the first fund I will launch without a doubt. And if somebody if a reasonably big AMC comes up with that, I will be happy to start investing in it.
Now we have a category of a few questions on the calculator episodes, Pattu, right? First one is from Shyam Warriar. Thank you for your insight. But won't your monthly expenses also increase with each year, with more and more commitment and responsibilities that might get attached as we grow? And of course, I think I know your answer, Pattu, but are there any calculators that cater for this? Or is the solution just to do it every year?
You can have a budgeting app. See, the one thing I have always dreamed of is have a one app for everything. You do your budget and your budget is going to gradually increase. You take those expenses, you can decide which of those expenses are going to be part of retirement and so on. Those expenses will be automatically fed into the goal planner. You have a portfolio tracker. The current value of those investment is automatically fed into the portfolio plan, financial goal planner. I have that in my sheet. So everything is fed in. So you just need to keep updating, and every day also you can do the financial plan because you don't need to do. It's all there, and you can look at it. You can see the monthly investment increase, the monthly investment required for a goal increase or decrease. I have seen how the monthly investment required for retirement has gone down over the years for me. When I see it decreasing, it tells me I'm on the right path. Sure. Right? It tells me I have accomplished more and more of the corpus I need. Sure. So everything, it can be an all-in-one app. Maybe developers looking at this can come up with one. That bus is passed for me. I can't get into Python coding, online coding, so on.
And I'm sure there are lots of coders out there listening to us who can team up with you. But so your robo advisory currently does not offer this.
Robo advisory is a financial planning tool. It doesn't It doesn't take budgeting and so on.
All right, moving on to the next calculator question. And this is more philosophical, actually, although it is on the calculators. Mathematically, it makes sense, I agree. And this is from Shyam Warriar. But it doesn't look very practical for a person coming from a middle-class background, even if they are in their 30s. Basically, he's implying that, look, the amounts that these calculators are throwing up sometimes can be beyond our acceptance, understanding, etc., etc. How do you tackle it? How do you mentally or emotionally tackle this stuff? I think you've briefly broached this topic, Pattu, but anything else to add?
So somebody asked me this question, there was a long rant I got from email, and I wrote a response to it. First of all, I think we have to stop telling ourselves, I'm middle class, I'm the average man, I'm the common man. You must tell yourself, I'm done with it. I'm tired of being labeled middle class by myself, by other people. I want to be rich. And this thing, being rich is bad, money is bad. No, when you become rich, you can give more, you can donate more. I've talked about that also, I think, if I'm not wrong. So I think the mindset has to change. We have to tell ourselves, I'm no longer going to be middle class in 10 years, in 15 years. I'm going to be at least upper middle class, or if not rich. Once you have that mindset, you will have to strive and take some risks. So this person asked me, and I think more or less the same question: can the common man, the common person in India, achieve financial independence? After looking at all these calculators and so on, more or less the same question. My answer to that is, if a common man wants to remain a common man, nowhere in the world can he or she achieve financial independence. Whether they are in the US, Canada, Norway, if they are going to be considered a common man in the middle rung of the social stations, they are now going to be financially independent. It's going to be very, very difficult. So they will have to take risks in their career. They will have to make sacrifices with their time, with their effort, maybe with their spending, and only then is this possible. So they will have to make some huge changes. I mean, there is nobody I have seen who said, "Oh, this is a retirement planning tool. I have put the numbers. It's fantastic. It says X is the amount I have to invest. I'm already investing more than X." How many people say that?
We do get a few comments like that, but
Very, very, very few. I mean, that's
so there is one question, and I've not selected it, but if I can remember it right, he says, I am saving much, much. He used the word much 4 times. Much, much, much more than I need to based on this calculator. Is there a calculator that will show that I'm working too much? I'm not sure if I can. You know what I mean? He needs to retire much earlier. Is there a calculator that shows him that?
yeah, you can adjust the numbers to you can set your retirement date and check if you're ready to retire and so on. So those things can be done. But my point is, most people are going to panic. Most of them have lost sleep. I tell my audience when I give lectures, I spoke to RBI. I told the RBI staff that if I speak before lunch, I give the audience loss of appetite. After lunch, it's indigestion. And these people were looking at me like zombies at the end of the talk. They were frozen stiff because they had independent calculators in their laptops. They did it, and they were shell shocked. So that's how it's going to be. But the point is, can you take the first step to change? That's how you go forward.
Great. Moving on to medical insurance, Pattu. A quick question. This is from Harpreet Gandhi. What should an NRI do who's planning to work till retirement abroad and then move back to India? Should he or she buy a basic health insurance now itself? Only buy once they're back in India at the age of 60? Considering age, health conditions one may develop in the meantime.
Buying now is better. Great. Because you don't know where you could be uninsurable at that time.
Yeah. And it might be really expensive, right?
Yeah.
Quick second question on medical insurance. This is from John Jose. Would it be better if I take a 10 lakh health insurance policy to avoid the risk of room rent sublimit? Because 10,000 per day is a good safe amount for room rent sublimit.
That depends. So if you are sure that you don't want a private player, so there are two kinds of player. You get a private policy or you get a policy from the PSUs. If you're sure that you don't want an insurance from the private guys, if you don't trust them, if you're somebody like me, then a PSU insurance with a large cover will help. However, the PSUs themselves are offering policies with no room rent sublimits, or they kind of a modified. They offer they say that you can get a standard AC single occupancy room for any amount, which is not bad. I mean, a standard AC room, single occupancy, for any amount is fine. It's the best category, right? It's okay. It's absolutely. I mean, there are deluxe, super deluxe, etc., and so on. But come on, you can manage with that, right? You're not going to stay in the hospital for months and months, hopefully. So there are many policies and there are options. For example, if I'm not, United India has got this kind of a rider in their family health insurance policy. Oriental Insurance has come up with an optional add-on where you can remove the room rent clause. So the PSCs themselves are catering to such options, so you can consider those. But if you think that's expensive, then you can look at the private players. The private players, most of them don't have room rent sublimits as of now, at least. Right. But that could change in future. And you can consider them looking at the criteria that we talked about in the episodes.
Right. But I guess the basis of his question is that 10,000 is a nice benchmark, but that benchmark might change, right? If room rents like suddenly shoot up.
Depends on the hospital you go to. So I would suggest that people should, before buying health insurance, get yourself a family doctor and look at the hospitals nearby. Go to the billing counter near the bill. You just stand near the billing counter. They will give you the tariff. You can take a photo of the tariff and just keep it. I have done those stupid things. So that gives you an idea of what is the kind of expense. And if you go to the OPD of a hospital every so often, you can see the increase. It will jump.
Yeah.
So you do that and then decide.
Cool. Now we go to a category of questions which I've labeled as complicated, Pattu, right? So this might take a little bit of time, but this is from Vivek 788. I'm someone who is a DIY investor since 7 years. Not perfect, made several mistakes, got lucky as well. For a year, I have been trying to internalize Pattu's mental model of risks and goal based investing. I have the gnawing problem of how to decide which of my mutual funds to consolidate and which to continue. I think he meant which ones to keep and which ones to get rid of. Don't say keep only index, as I am not comfortable with its lack of downside protection. I ruminated on the topic of contracting a fee only advisor, but I felt the charges are too high. Well, that's something you have to deal with. Also, many of them claim to be only recommend index funds. I have my own tracker for goals and funds are mapped too. So the question is, how to go about consolidating funds? I currently check portfolio overlap, expense ratio, and asset mix suitability for a goal horizon. I still feel I have too many funds across categories. And then I read the list of funds, and it is quite a bit. 3 index funds, low volatility, 1 balanced advantage, 5 ELSS, 1 sectoral, 2 small cap, 1 focused, 2 retirement plus NPS, 1 liquid, 1 conservative hybrid. That is after closing some debt, active large caps, 1 sectoral, 1 index, and 1 aggressive hybrid.
So if after all this analysis that you mentioned, portfolio overlap, expense ratio, etc., if you're still not able to make a decision, do INKY PINKY PONKEY. It works. I mean, it's just the same, right? Because you never know what the future is going to be. So it's just random. Already you have a large portfolio. So you are basically representing the whole market with your portfolio in some way. So you can get rid of some. Your 5 ELSS fund, get rid of, stop investing in ELSS funds and choose the new tax regime. And after the funds become, mature enough, 3 years, after 3 years, they are old enough to redeem, you can slowly get rid of them. So every 6 months or so, or every 1 year, remove 2 funds or 3 funds. Then after 5 years or 6 years, you'll have a nice portfolio.
I have my own personal question based on this topic, and your words from the previous episode also, Pattu, about how do you quantify clutter, how do you quantify diversification. So how about this solution, Pattu, where I have exactly 2 mutual funds in my entire portfolio. One is a Nifty 50 or whatever, some index fund, and 1 debt fund, and that's it. And of course, my insurance is in place, my etc. etc. That's a super simple plan. Yes. And say I do it for 30, 40 years.
Particularly if you don't have an EPF or kind of an arrangement, if you're a freelancer and so on, it's the ideal thing. You don't need to worry about it. You can look at your business, forget about your investments. Once a year, look at your portfolio. That's the happiest place to be in.
Really, literally. So no diversification. 1 equity mutual fund,
that's enough.
Index based, 1 debt fund, that's it. Maybe a liquid fund or whatever that is, and that's it.
Yeah, liquid fund, money market fund is also fine. If you are somebody who don't like, there are people who like volatility in the debt now, who don't like volatility in the debt now. Both are fine. It doesn't make a difference. For those who don't like volatility, liquid fund or money market fund will do. For others, a corporate bond fund or a gilt fund.
Are there any risks to this strategy? Like, what if that 1 fund I invested in was Franklin Templeton?
So you can choose it. So things have changed now. That's not going to happen again. That kind of thing is not, something new may happen, but that kind of thing is not going to happen again. But in the money market segment and liquid fund segment, you are more or less safely okay. See, there's a fund called Franklin Savings Fund, which is a money market fund. It suffered huge redemption pressure because of all the other problems. It did not close, but it still did well. So there's a lot of liquidity in the low duration segment of the bond market. So that's fine too.
I was thinking of also perhaps dedicating half an episode to what happened actually in the Franklin story, right? Was it all because they just didn't have enough cash or etc. etc.? But
it's a big, we can talk about it. Yeah, it can happen again. There's something called redemption risk in mutual funds, which many people don't understand.
Right. So you're saying it's as simple as that. Just have 1 equity, 1 debt, and then just keep putting in money for them. The idea came when you mentioned in the last episode, you have 57% of your equity in Parag Parekh, right? And, 1 fund can hold you in good stead for life. I think
my model is very risky because Parag Parekh is a very, things can change. I've been lucky with it and I'm happy. I'm emotionally kind of attached to those returns. So I'm just holding on to it. It is not a logical idea, but technically it's a very high concentration risk that one should not take. But the point is I'm confident because I've seen losses and I've seen underperformance. More than losses, I've seen underperformance. If a person can live through underperformance with respect to benchmark, I think they can live through anything. They can handle anything. Losses is whole market, everything will.
So interesting. Another thing from the previous episode that's sticking out, Pattu, is about how you're not going to shift everything to an index fund because of the massive tax you'll have to pay. Right? So just thinking into the future, say 30, 40, 50 years from now, where your portfolio is perhaps inherited by your son. Is there any tax that he has to pay if he redeems? How does that particular work?
No, whoever, if he redeems, he's going to have to pay tax.
On the entire amount, just as you would have if you switched.
Yeah, right. That's always the case.
Okay. Moving on to further questions. Pattu, is there any benefit, and this has come from Narayana Raugula. Sir, is there any benefit in investing direct equity other than to save expense ratio charged by mutual funds?
See, I strongly believe that direct equity should be done by those who have a passion for finding good businesses. There are people who say, I love to track businesses. I love understanding what their model is, what are the kind of competitors. That's fine. Those are the people who are best suited for direct equity. Those people should not look at expense ratios of mutual funds or performance of mutual funds. They are passionate about it. Once you're passionate, you should not compare. You go ahead and do it. It's fine. Absolutely fine. But if you say that there are many other people who say, if you invest in direct stocks, you can easily beat mutual funds. That is absolute nonsense. If you invest in direct stocks, you can't even regularly beat the Nifty or Sensex. It's very hard to do. I mean, that is the reason why most people don't bother trying to compare. They will say, my stock made 3x, 4x, 100x is not a big deal. 100x in 1 year, 5 years is a big deal. 100x over 20 years is not a big deal. Because the longer the time, the annualized return will come down. So that you can see these stock guys, many of them talk about absolute stock returns. They don't talk about annualized return because it's very hard to find annualized return. I have a tool for that. But if you have dividends, splits, bonuses, etc., and so on, very hard to find annualized return. So most of them don't bother comparing. Only those passionate guys should invest. Others should not. That's my opinion.
Great. Next question by Piyush Burman, Pattu. Where should I start reading out his question from? My question is, I'm planning to invest for my kids' graduation. You recommended hybrid funds in free FinCal channel because of downside risk. Is there something changed in hybrid equity which we need to be aware of? Or you're just recommending that so that we start the investment journey?
No, I always like hybrid funds. He's referring to aggressive hybrid funds. Those are funds with 65% or more in direct equity. Not the other kind of hybrid funds we discussed last episode.
Right.
So aggressive hybrid funds, so I always love them because suppose I give you a portfolio of 100% stocks, right? It will move up and down. It has got its own risk and reward. Suppose I replace 30% of that portfolio with bonds. The reward is going to be more or less the same, but the risk is significantly reduced. So diversification is called the only free lunch in finance, or maybe in the universe, because all you need to do to lower risk but not lower reward proportionally is just add bonds. Replace your some stocks with bonds. That's what an aggressive hybrid fund does. As of now, it is absolutely criminal that no AMC has come up with an aggressive hybrid index fund. So there are indices which has got 65% equity and 35% of bonds, like the CRISIL aggressive index, hybrid index. Right. You can have an index fund that tracks that. We don't have that. All the aggressive hybrid funds today are all actively managed. And there's a lot of money in there because the AMCs sell them as the way I said, diversification, blah, blah kind of stuff. And I think they don't want to that AUM to go to the index. That is my feeling. I
To the
haven't
passively
seen.
managed side.
Yeah, I don't see any. It's a no-brainer. If I had a AMC license today, that will be the first fund I will launch without a doubt.
Wow.
And if somebody if a reasonably big AMC comes up with that, I will be happy to start investing in it. And I've said that several times because many aggressive hybrid funds cannot consistently beat a aggressive hybrid index.
Amazing. It has to be then a business reason, Pattu, that it's not been done so far.
It is. At least the new AMCs can come up with it. People like Zero the Agro or Bandhan, whoever, they're all new AM kids. They can do it. I don't see why they're doing it. There's nothing in the SEBI rules that prevent this. But I think it's just a business reason. So let's see.
Maybe we tag Nikhil Kamath on this episode and see if he, on this little post.
I don't want to talk to AMC guys at all.
But he's not. I mean, is he an AMC guy? Now he is.
Yeah. No AMC. I don't want to talk to any finance people at all. It's a waste of my time.
I feel very lucky in the place I am right now. So here's a very interesting, and perhaps we'll call a close to this episode, Pattu, because we can just keep going in different directions. So this is a question that came in about parents, right? My concern is not about me, but my parents. My father in his mid-60s is retired from his banking job, gets a pension, and my mother will retire next year from a private school teacher job. It's amazing how similar this is to my situation. But she wasn't in the private sector. She was in the government institution as a teacher. They are financially fine, but all their investments are in FDs and PFs. Should I advise them to diversify into equity? And if so, in what instruments and how much? And this opened up a whole, series of thoughts, Pattu, for me about how there are lots of listeners who are at that stage in their life, in their mid-30s, maybe early 30s, who now have to start perhaps thinking about taking care of their parents. Or if not, and bless those parents, including mine, who it was such an eye-opening fact that in my investment journey, I don't have to think about my parents. And that's perhaps the greatest gift they've given to me, right? There's no pressure on me to take care of them financially. But how does one start dealing with their finances for them? And am I wrong to say that a large chunk of our parents, that generation who grew up in the 70s, 80s, they were all in these FDs kind of space, right? FTPF, fixed income, safe, and they've somehow managed. So how does one deal with this entire world?
My recommendation is don't. I think many people assume they're financially literate and assume their parents are not financially literate, which is a big mistake. So either you just leave them be, or the best thing that you can do for them is to make sure that they themselves don't make mistakes on their own, is to hire the services of a SEBI registered fee only advisor and let them work on their finances. And so ideally the advisor should be a little experienced, slightly older, because you don't want a 25-year-old gung-ho guy working on a senior citizen portfolio and say put it all in stocks, and that will be dangerous. A senior, somebody who's senior, so that they can also resonate with, right? Somebody who's in the 50s, I would that'll be fine. For somebody in the 60s, 50s is not so bad to resonate with. So that would be the best investment you can make, and it will be a good for them and for you yourself.
So, Pattu, my final question on this episode to try and get it to a close is there any, I don't know whether it's anecdotes or data about how people in the past planned for retirement? I find that quite fascinating, right? For example, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, did they even think about, was it literally putting cash in a pillowcase? They certainly didn't have mutual funds. They didn't, when was the start of FDs? Banking started maybe 150 years ago. So this concept of retirement planning, is it extremely new? And they seem to be doing fine, right? These people who are in their 70s, 80s, most of them at least, perhaps the ones I know.
So that's a tricky thing to answer, but I can tell you this: bonds are probably the oldest retirement planning tools. We always had bonds. Bonds are several centuries old. But the point is that we could have private bonds and government bonds. So there are many people who have been bankrupt because they invested in the wrong kind of bonds and so on. So bonds have always been the primary retirement tool, but then all these bankers came in, the insurance guys came in, and they kind of made this kind of annuities. So they became the middlemen. So they will invest in the bonds themselves, but they will give you a different product like a fixed deposit or an annuity, so that they can pocket the difference, the difference in profits and so on. So that kind of layered products came in later, but bonds have always been the number one retirement planning tool, and it has come full circle. So today we now have RBI Retail Direct, and I think we should probably talk about that in of itself. It's an excellent idea to talk about that, because now an individual retiree or an individual can buy a bond directly, and they can buy a 30-year, 40-year, even 50-year bond. And there are situations where a 50-year bond will be useful and so on. So you can buy these bonds. They are the safest retirement. You're directly interacting with your government. As long as the currency is stable, you are guaranteed of getting that income.
And you get a yearly payout?
Yeah, twice a year, every 6 months.
Fascinating. So you're saying back in the day, it used to be literally these paper certificates of these bonds, right?
Yeah.
And they were so precious. And I remember there was a big calamity in my family when my mom lost these paper certificates, and it was so tough to kind of deal with that, etc., etc. So interesting. So you're saying this entire concept and thinking about the future, I guess, has always been around, and perhaps not much has changed, except in our times we have additional products and the luxury of equity mutual funds, etc., etc. So on that note, Pattu, a conversation that went in several different directions. Thank you as usual for your time. Have a great week, and please, we urge all you listeners and viewers, this show is nothing if you don't send in these types of questions and your particular experiences and the problems that you want to solve in your financial journey. Let Pattu take a shot at it, and we'll see you on the next week of Let's Get Rich with Pattu. Bye, Pattu.
Bye-bye.